Hello, STA. How are you? It's 8:02. Getting better. How's it going? I'm in the kitchen today because we've got the in-laws coming down to stay in the bubble. So that's why slightly different background for the observant of you. We have got to episode 15 of Sports Therapy Association. Let's talk about, which is fantastic. 15 is a monumental number. And we have a monumental guest as well waiting in the lobby for you, both in stature. Can you say it's monumental? He might give me a lamp for that. No, monumental's good, isn't it? Both in stature and in reputation. And he's going to be coming up, none other than Keith Burnett, who you asked for, and we have got. So I'm really pleased that we're starting to actually get some requests in for people you want to hear from. Keep sending them in. Don't put it off. Anybody you want to come up here to speak about certain topic or something, then email either myself, matt@thesta.co.uk, or Gary@thesta.co.uk, and we'll do what we can to bring them up. And of course, also there's a few conversations going on about, I'd love to still get 3 sports reps from different sports reps, regional reps, just have a little comparison. It might boil down to nothing geographically. There might be more similarities and differences, but it's going to be 3 different businesses as well, which I'll be interested to hear. So I think a couple of you are really keen to find a third. So get together in the background in the discussion groups and see if 3 of you can come up, and that'll be a good episode as well. I've got nothing planned for next week, to tell you the truth. So you could sort that out. Let me know, and we could do that for next week if you fancy. Anyway, right. Let's not forget, last week was really, really good. I joked that previously, prior to last week, who was Nicola Elwood, the mind and communication specialist, I was joking, wasn't I, that the week before was Mike Grice, and Mike Grice was just like a god, and the chatter afterwards was amazing. And I was just trying to make Nicola feel uncomfortable, because that's what I like to do. But the response to Nicola and the chatter afterwards has been huge as well. So now today it's Keith who's got the weight on his shoulders. But as you all know, who anybody knows Keith, if there's anybody who could support any weight on his shoulders, it is our Keith. Very excited to bring him up. It's a topic which I admit straight away I've only done about a year and a half of pitchside work. So I'm really excited to be able to bring you a guest who's like probably out of all the members, definitely, and probably further afield than that, probably looking at the UK, has got a wealth of experience of working pitchside, and in particular with his studies and doctorate, we're going to have a look at head and neck injuries, which is a fantastically important. It's the sort of thing I refer on, okay, which, anybody who not in the know needs to refer on. But for those of you working on pitch side who might suddenly be landed with this in real life, you've got to be prepared. And as we'll hear from Keith, there's, as always in our industry, there's probably a few misconceptions, lack of studies. But our guest Keith is actually trying to change that by doing research himself. So very excited to bring him up. Just going to check if there's any other housekeeping going on. Let's have a quick hello to anybody who's in here already. Let's check I can get some. Mark here's on the ball. There he is. Evening, Mark. How are you? Thanks for everything, Mark, and everybody. Thanks for sharing it. It does really warm my and Gary's hearts when we see you guys sharing stuff in the background. It's really cool. You can't do it enough, really. It's really nice to see. Senorita Gary. Always looks like, if it's in Spanish, that would be Senorita Gary. So Senorita Gary's in the house. I like that. STA Gary is here. Hi, Gary. How you doing? Timothy Grigg is here. This is the reason we're on the page instead of the group, because it just takes out that hassle of Facebook user coming up. So if you do want to share a comment, if you want to say hello, just see your name appear. It's networking, isn't it? It's nice to see it. Then this is your chance. Becky Carroll is off. I feel like a DJ now. Becky Carroll's listening as she drives home from a busy day at work. Hi, Becky. How's it going? Remember to stick to the speed limit. Louise Aker is here as well. Hey, Louise, how you doing? Thanks for joining us again. And Glenn Murphy's here saying, evening, Mike. It's a bit cryptic, isn't it? Do you mean Matt? Or are you saying hello to someone else in the room? Anyway, hi, Glenn. Hi, George. Right, so there we go. Right, so without further ado, tonight, questions, people. This is your chance to have a chat to somebody who is an STA mentor. He's under a lot of demand now, as we mentioned a while back, mentors. There's a lot of evidence now that having a mentor is just the logical thing to do, especially if you're a younger therapist or moving into a new discipline. So we have got one of the finest in our group here. So without further ado, let us get rid of that and bring up Keith Burnett. Hello, mate.
Evening, you all right?
How are you doing? I'm very well. I can call you monumental in stature, can't I?
I think so. I was going to say, when we look at necks, I've got to find mine first because of the big shoulders I've got.
Well, there
So
we
it's,
go. If that's
yeah,
not
I'll
monumental,
take
what
that one.
is? Yeah.
I'd like to say, obviously, I just saw one of the members driving home. So if I do bore you, please do pull over. Don't operate machinery when falling asleep.
That's very responsible, monumental, and yeah, and very morally observant. Fantastic. Right, thanks for joining us, mate. I know you're a busy guy. Well, I say you're busy, but you're in a caravan in Wales at the moment, aren't you? At some festival?
Yeah, currently I'm in a friend's cupboard space. So the door that I'm behind me at the minute, I'm in Wales working from home, not my home. But I thought from the safe aspect of come to a place where I can get good internet signal, and then rather than try and do this from a caravan.
It's not bad. You're a little bit blurred, but not nearly as bad as when Mike James attempts to. He puts out all these videos which he records in some incredible software, but whenever you get him on a podcast, it's just this kind of like fizzle with the Welsh accent coming out. So you've done well, mate. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Right, so remember, people, you can chip in with comments as and when both myself and Keith can see the comments. So, Keith, if you see something in the side which you think, actually, Matt, stop going on, there's something interesting there I want to talk about, then just you chime in and say it, because I may well miss it. But whilst people are thinking, and well, not everyone, hopefully not everyone in here, or people listening or watching the recording on YouTube, know who you are. So why don't you give us a little breakdown on who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Okay, so a lot of therapists out with the STA sort of getting in contact with me regards to sort of pathways I've come from, and a lot of them can relate to where I've come from. So traditionally, I went to university, did sports science with not really an understanding what direction I wanted to go to. Did a degree, did a bit of applied work in conditioning and training development, became a lecturer at college, as you do as you sort of progress into working from there. Then went back to university to do postgraduate studies in biomechanics and conditioning. But then I got introduced to the rehabilitation, because rehabilitation in my days was physiotherapy. They never really had a sports therapist, sports rehabilitator. So working within the conditioning background in a high performance area, I got identified of the injury aspects and what things we can't do and where we need to refer. So once I'd done my postgraduate studies, I then looked into the direction of, well, how can I work with injured athletes? So I did a lot of things like a lot of the audience do. I did the level 3, level 4 sports massage to start looking at the body work, soft tissue work. And as I did that, I was working as a pitchside therapist or with pitchside first aid, lower level clubs, just to sort of get my confidence into there. And I did it for free initially, then started working with the sort of grassroots clubs. When I then identified there's other routes down to go into sports therapy, I went down a postgraduate conversion route with Leeds Beckett University. So I did a 2-year part-time degree. Oh, sorry, 2-year part-time masters, where I'd come up on the weekends. I'd be working in clinic. So as soon as I did my level 3, I opened up as a mobile sports massage therapist, as a lot of people do. Turned up in my little clapped out car with a couch in the back, little magnetic plates on the side of my car. And literally I progressed to opening up a little 3-meter squared shed in the garden. So I started working at home, building up a little rehab area. Once I'd then done my level 4 and progressed in competencies and things got better. So working into the rugby area, I then started getting more interest, did the degree, the master, should I say, and then started questioning things. So as I'm working in rugby, I wanted to then say, well, actually, the areas that I've been educated in are missing. I'm not able to do things. So I then went on to look at further studies into neck injuries, only because there was an incident where, and this will happen. So I'll give you a story. Basically, a rugby player, head contact onto head contact, went down onto the deck, and we nearly lost him on the pitch. So we had air ambulances and everything. The game got cancelled, and it made me reflect. And one thing I always became was a reflective practitioner and saying, well, what could I have done better? So going down from the rugby, from grassroots rugby, I wanted to then go into a better organised area, because at grassroots rugby, you're the one person that works and the whole weight is on your shoulders. You're going to be doing the screening, the taping before, a bit of soft tissue work beforehand, and then you go on the pitch side. And literally is a case of, in a contact sport, I used to work in football, I've worked in skipping, so that the skipping's a sport. It's working in international sports. I worked in tennis, so from that background, you get different injuries, and you understand about the epidemiology and etiology of injuries. Because I was from a rugby background, I found my feet in rugby, so it's something I settled in with. So I ended up working in National League Rugby, and then got an opportunity to work with the Army. So I did rugby league, and then as I've progressed and gone on from there. So I then wanted to further understand what I'm missing. And by speaking to colleagues, networking and so forth, which a lot of the folks at the STA do brilliantly online, is asking questions regularly. And I wasn't getting the answers, and nobody really had the answers. So I went and discussed it with a neck clinician who was a South African doctor. And he just said to me, they said, the problem what you've got is a lot of people don't understand neck injuries is because it's advanced. And what I then did is I looked at the people who were in the league that I was in, and I questioned every time a new therapist came over. First thing you do in pitchside first aid is you go over to the opposition therapist, introduce them, and alarmingly, half the teams didn't have one. So I had to cover both teams. So you'll find when you're working in some lower level sports, you're lucky to have anybody at pitchside, whereas what I've been told is the clubs I've worked at are over lucky to have somebody of the caliber that I work at, which that's by the by. What I then identified with the therapist is literally all of the guys or girls that were in my sort of field were working on. You say, well, actually, get to know each other and so forth. When there is an issue, who's helping who? And literally is a case of, well, what do you know about neck injuries and so forth? What do you know about spinal collars? And so many people have done different pitchside first aids where maybe spinal mobilization has not been introduced, spinal stabilization with scooping has not been introduced and so forth. So there was no standardized sort of practice. So what I then went on to for my doctorate is to say, well, actually, when I question the players, what do you understand about sort of concussion, neck injuries and so forth? And it was very little. So when I talked to the therapist over a coffee or a beer at the end of the game, again, we get into this discussion and say, we didn't really cover that in my education. And we've got different people working in rugby where you're a soft tissue therapist that's done a pitchside trauma qualification, or you're an advanced practitioner that's gone on to do a master's degree. You get variations of different aspects. So it was a case of wanting to find a process to say, where do I go and what do I get the information? And it didn't really seem to be there. So my doctorate that I've gone on to do is a professional doctorate rather than a PhD. So a PhD can be classified as a research doctorate where you're trying to prove a certain fact or you're bringing in new information, whereas my professional doctorate is actually to produce industry relevant content. So it'll be basically education for the masses to go out live rather than be behind paywalls, so the STA member can get access to that sort of thing. So how I got to where I went from there is I went from a level 3, level 4, did my master's degree, and now I'm doing a doctor's degree. Now, I pinch myself at times because I did a BTEC, and I'm not going to disregard BTECs because I taught BTECs as well. But in 1997, when I did a BTEC, I was on a referral process because I didn't get education. And my tutor turned around and said, I wouldn't bother staying at college, go on and do something else. And then I've just got into the field and I've applied myself and I understand more and more and more. And it's just a case of as I've got older and as I've got into the field, it makes more sense. And what it does make sense is the things that are needed are not there. And that's where I've progressed. So it's funny because a lot of the questions I get from a lot of members is going, where do I need to go next? You go in the right process. You do your level 3, you do your level 4, you can become a clinician, which I've had my own private practice. You can go into field and work at pitchside. You can do everything. You can even go into teaching like myself and Matt does. So it's the sky's the limit, depends where your passion is. But one thing I do say is my passion, if I could have done this when I was 17, 18, I think I'd have been a better sort of understanding at a young age where I wanted to be. But they say the profession wasn't really around awareness in those sort of days. So I got forced, because I'm a rugby player, you go down the sports science route. I wanted to be a graphic designer originally. I wanted to draw, but then I wasn't very good at art. So my art teacher told me to find something else to do. And then I just progressed and progressed. And then the reason why I say that is because there's so many different members of the STA that starting off in their practice from coming away from their job and saying, I want to be a practitioner. All I'd say is I started off, as I say, out the back of a car, moving around to see people. And then as I sort of built my practice up, I then started working out of a rugby club or out of a wooden hut. You don't need £1 million facility. You need knowledge. Knowledge and application is what actually gets you results, rather than singing, dancing equipment and all this sort of stuff. So, so long-winded. So where I am now is I teach at Wolverhampton University, so I've just gone taken on a role there, come away from clinical practice, but I also work with England Universities Rugby League. So I'm now an international rugby league sports therapist. So again, if you think about the pathway I've come from, opportunities are there, and the only ways I've got these jobs is through networking. So it's as you get through these different factors, is you meet people, and it's really interesting what Matt said about people start getting to know me. I met Matt a couple of years ago at the
tell you what, it's more than a couple.
I'd say time flies.
It was like Therapy Expo.
Therapy Expo, probably 10 years ago or something like that. But you then get to know people in your field. You then get a referral network, and my hashtag is Dr. Neck, because, as I say, the amount of people I've seen that are motorcycle crash patients, ex-rugby players, arthritic necks, a lot of pain from general occupational, but I just seem to be the person that's become Dr. Neck. So that hashtag's building up from there. So hopefully that's answered that question for you. Long-winded one, but
couldn't be long enough, mate. There's so much in there which is going to be music to the ears of many, I'm sure. I mean, we've talked on this show before about what should I do now, and should I leave my main job and go to, because I really my passion here. And it is a calling, isn't it? A lot of the time, wanting to look after people and help people in pain is a calling. It's not like, oh, how can I make my millions? Oh, I'm going to become a sports therapist. It's not. It's something else which calls you. So you're living proof that regardless of your beginnings and your education, and teachers saying, you know what, mate, just go, and you're not going to get anywhere, just do that. As long as you've got, like you say, the application, I think is the most important thing, and the confidence. Did you have doubts, though? I mean, you had a couple of people in your career putting you down. And in particular, definitely. I'm interested also about, because you're living proof. I don't know what the percentages of people in your field now you're working internationally, physios compared to people coming up through sports therapy. Do people still think, oh, you're not a physio? Or have you managed to prove now and open the door to the fact you don't have to be a physiotherapist to work with international teams?
The original, when I used to do strength and conditioning, as an ex-prop forward, so if you don't understand rugby, prop forwards are the big guys. And this is before, I say, at my heaviest, I was 25.5 stone. At my lightest, I was 17 stone. I think I was about 2 weeks old. But I went into strength and conditioning, and someone once turned around to me and said, strength and conditioning, what can you condition? Hair. Look at you. And it's that mentality where they go, actually, what is a sports therapist? What is it? So I still have a joke with the England coaches and management setup, because they always say, how's the physio? I was like, I don't know, we haven't got one.
Yeah.
So it's about constantly challenging, and quite a few people say, I'm working in my rugby club, I'm working in my football club, and I'm just setting up in the physio room. I'm like, it's a physio room if a physio's in there. It's a treatment room, or whatever you want to call it. So there have been quite a few barriers, but you've just got to be constant, and it's about the education and joking around, and I say, without taking, if you put therapist and separate E and rapist, you come two different words. And I used to get that with football players. They printed all my stuff on there for a joke, and it'd say sports. You can project the rest. But it was that constant sort of process saying, well, actually, let me show you what I can do, and then we'll talk about that aspect. So what I then did was speak by results, and it's not just about results of injury rehab or anything from this. It's about getting the players to buy into what you're doing, getting the coaches and management to buy into what you're doing. because that's really the challenge. I'm not going to use this, we're a young profession, because we're not anymore. What it is about I put out an advertisement earlier on the STA members page about a football team, and it was a guy who contacted me just through a chat, and he says, "Oh, I'm looking for a physio," and I says, "You're not. You're looking for a sports therapist. That's the specialist." Oh, so I spent 2 or 3 minutes having a coffee with him, chatting away and whatnot, and just educating him. He's like, "No, actually, that's what I need." So it's about constant education reinforcement that you do need a sports therapist. Get out the mentality of archaic sort of processing. But yeah.
And I like to think, hopefully, that organisations like the Sports Therapy Association, which has got quite a few proud people now standing up and talking about things, there's some right loud mouths in this room, are actually doing the industry a favour, because they're not afraid like you to say, "No, I'm not a physio, I'm actually a sports therapist." And they'll go, "What's the difference?" And you say, "Well, I specialise in sports. I'm not working in a hospital in any single department. There's a lot of stuff I haven't studied, but when it comes to sports, boof, that's what I funneled down into."
Well, this is the problem with my neck research, is that it is annoyed a lot of people. And I've made quite a lot of enemies because I've broken as Gary likes to say, the status quo. I've literally annoyed a lot of people, but it's for a better thing. So I won't mention organisations, but if you look at who's in charge of rugby union, I've had a lot of information going, well, actually, you shouldn't really be saying stuff like that. I'm like, well, I'm not saying anything that's not right. It's not true. So it's an education establishments and so forth. So what
sort of things have you been saying?
So literally, there was I was referred to by an education manager to a page on neck training. When I got to that page, it was a blank page. So I was like, "So you're referring me to a blank page when I'm looking at what you actually currently do for education, and there's nothing there." He's like, "Oh, that must be an error." I said, "Okay, so if you can get it updated." 2 weeks later, still empty. So I was like, "Okay." So, and they say it's when in a part of my research, I dissected a course and saying, literally, there's nothing about necks on undergraduate degrees, and it was like, well, okay, well, what do you want us to do? And it's literally a case of going, well, that's what doctorate level study is about. It's about identifying weaknesses, identifying flaws, and trying to not patchwork but educate and inform.
Why do you think the gap's there, in particular to neck injuries?
It's really interesting because a lot of people have got views that the neck is an advanced area. But if you think about it, I'd say 90% of the people that work in contact sports are undergraduates. So if an undergraduate comes out and they're ready to go, as they've graduated from their proficiencies, and they go into a contact sport, you shouldn't need advanced skills, but it should be in that sort of process. So, and what I mean by skills is being able to assist on the pitch, understanding life support or understanding neck management or what you're going to be doing there. The RFL have said don't put neck collars on. The RFU is saying we're still doing neck collars. So it's about understanding the process, what's in your sport. Then a screening. How do you assess necks? How do you assess neck function? So we'll talk about proprioception, and there's an issue where if somebody has got neck pain, they've automatically, if you ever watch somebody just through their gait and they've got pain, antalgic gait basically makes them shift over. So that's an issue with their walking pattern. It's exactly the same as if you've got a prop forward and a rugby player, and they've got neck stiffness or neck pain, and they try and go into a tackle, and their head will not be in the right position because either through neck or proprioception error, they're then at higher risk that they're actually going to create further damage when they tackle. And a lot of the research is said within rugby, union and league, the highest concussions and the highest neck injuries is the tackler. So if you get your head wrong because your neck is not functioning effectively or you've got pain, then you're at higher risk to start with. So it's literally the saying it's advanced, but it's if you think about the concussion movie, that identified that concussion was 10, 15 years behind because of information not given. If education is there, you're going to jump on it and buy. It's like the next gimmick that people want to buy. They'll buy it and they'll bring it to the forefront of therapy. So why is the sort of areas that we need to work in, your main primary skeletal structure, your muscular structure, your nervous system of an athlete, not part of the education. So some will identify it, but it may not be how to do effective neck training, or how to do proprioception, or how to do vestibular oculomotor rehab, which is more specific concussion. So I understand with concussion is newer, but in 1987, there was a paper produced by a physiotherapist that says, in order to stop neck injuries, we need to physically train the neck. In 1987. Mm-hmm. I did a research paper 2 years ago, which we're basically currently on the write-up, where I asked 570 rugby players, do they do neck training? And they was like, no. About 10 to 12% did, and they were your premiership players, championship players, male and female. So I said, why do you not do neck training? And they said, A, it's not relevant for my position, and B, I don't know how. So the question then comes in, if the players don't know how to train, who's educating them how to train? So if the therapists aren't giving them the information, whether that's the conditioning coaches, which you'll hardly ever find in a club, you'll find a sports therapist before you'll find a conditioning coach in a club. So why are they not getting that part of their session? And it's literally a case of, that's the missing link, is it's the education, the knowledge and application, which we want to sort of bring into that process. And obviously my research is rugby, but it can go into any contact sport. Wrestling, could be judo, karate, or any martial arts, MMA. All of these is literally saying you've got to basically introduce some form of stabilization and active stabilization, because the old mentality used to be isometric neck strengthening for the old prop forwards, for your big solid neck people. But the biggest problem with concussion and neck injuries is a whiplash effect. So hyperflexion or hyperextension or rotation. So you get a couple of years ago at Therapy Expo, I did a presentation on the stinger. And I see that still regularly, where people get the neck gets forced out, application into the neck, and they lose power in their arm. So the nerve's basically been affected. And it happens all the time. It's an underreported thing. But how can we then strengthen that? When I asked the players who did do neck strengthening, they turned around and said, yeah, I just shrug. I was like, okay, so again, that's not educated. That's misunderstanding. So what I plan to do for the sort of outcome is to create a sort of output that people can use, that screening, management, and rehabilitation, return to play, is one of the sort of outcomes that I'm looking to do as part of my doctorate. So we're still a couple of years away yet, but it's still exciting times, and it annoys people that as you can hear the way I speak, I could talk my head off a chicken. It's something I'm passionate about.
Do you know Rosie Sexton?
Rosie Sexton,
she's the UFC. She was a UFC fighter, but she's also an osteopath. Works with Mike Grice and Solly Hull. Okay,
yeah, that's probably where I've heard the name. Yeah,
she's now got into politics. Now she's campaigning. She's already she's with the Green Party. She's incredible. But I remember she was actually a guest on One Chat Live, probably number 8. She was coming from martial arts, particularly women's mixed martial arts, but across the board, she identified the same thing, where athletes, particularly in mixed martial arts, where you are getting neck blocks and things, and as well as the striking, a distinct lack of training for necks. I'm sure there's a parallel between that. And she really started dipping into the research, and because she's a total geek like you. But there must be a crossover, like you've already mentioned, between wrestling and jiu-jitsu and the absence of neck training. I remember watching some of her videos. She produced like a masterclass thing, and it's things which, unless you're told, you wouldn't think of. Ways of, especially passive stuff with a trainer, kind of pushing it from different sides and getting you active and moving around the same as you were hit. Brilliant, really. So I reckon you should hook up with Rosie. She'd love to hear from you, because I'm sure there'd be a crossover.
I was going to say there's a couple of papers I'm looking at the minute regards to minimum dose response. So it's not about introducing something completely new and saying put this massive session, because we still have that mentality where they go, well, if I put strength in, I'm going to get big. So if you do hypertrophy training in the neck, you'll get a big solid neck. And there is some research that says a higher circumference of the neck decreases neck injury, but it's not. It's about active control. So again, it can transfer across, and it's like saying, well, what is there's a couple of pieces of equipment out there that are from America, or there's a couple of aspects on there where they say, well, introduce these at early ages, And I know the RFU have brought the Activate process in where they do the warm-up of the neck, but it's not just about the warm-up. You need to bring that into your physical preparation. So if you are going to the gym to perform for a sport, all it takes is a couple of exercises to be included in there, because you're going to train your shoulders, you're going to train your chest and your back. Why not go up and do a little bit more? But the research I'm looking at as well is basically the equipment use. So one of the question, or one of the answers that came from a lot of the players was, I don't have specific equipment for the neck. So what is specific equipment? We can use TheraBands, we can use Swiss balls, we can use anything. So it's rotational mechanics. You don't need a 300-400 pound piece of equipment that will create specifically for that, because I've got everything. So I've got this CROM, which is a device on the head, and it is gold standard to doing neck measurements. I have to do that for research. No, you just need a goniometer. You even need human eye to be able to work from there. There's a piece of equipment that you can get around your head, and you attach it to a big band, and you pump it up and it sticks in, and it's a rotational device. That is absolutely fantastic, but you ain't going to get a 400 piece of equipment in a grassroots. So it's about coming up with ideas. So it's like, well, how do you get a piece of TheraBand, or how do you do this to create that sort of aspect? And it is literally by sort of like producing a booklet or a sort of instructional guide to say these are ideas. And it's the minimal dose response, because the biggest thing in grassroots is if nobody trains and they don't go to the gym, that's not really the biggest issue, because the research shows that it's not really the lower level players that get the biggest issues. It's the semi-professional players. So semi-professional players, you'll see that a lot of their contracts are pay-per-play. So there's a bit of a problem there, because if they don't play, they don't get paid. Or they go to the gym, then they're doing their physical training at the club, then they're doing their rugby training at the club. They're only doing that twice a week, and then they're going full hog in a game. The professionals, you'll see concussion occurs quite a lot, but the management of concussion is a lot higher in professionals, because they're there with their therapist every day. They're controlled. You can control the load. This is the problem I'm finding with working in international sport, is you have got to basically coordinate with their club therapist to what you're doing to make sure you're not overloading that person for what they're currently doing already. And that's a sort of challenge working in international sport, because the communication may not be the greatest. So you've got to really sort of manage. We had a player that came over, had a Achilles issue, and the therapist said no training whatsoever. So I took him in the pool for some dynamic work, and then I just put him on an exercise bike, which I brought out on the side of the pitch with me. I was like, so he's still doing some work, he's still working through from there, and I've got him involved. But it's literally about, how do you basically increase something that's not already been done? And I say this, I'm finding the semi-professional areas the sort of hardest to maintain, because you're getting aspects on there. Now, the university guys that I work with, they will play university rugby. They've generally got a contract with a Super League club, so they'll be working with them, and then they'll be coming to us. So you've got that management of load quite heavy. So I do a lot of light work with them, because you're not going to do too much with them or introduce something new that'll affect their sort of processes there. But yeah.
Fantastic. Let's go over to some of the comments here. We've got some love being shown from Ryan. He says, I'm hopefully going to be working with the rugby this season. I'm keen to have some input advice from Keith. We are certainly getting it tonight, Ryan. Who has to be one of my industry idols of the therapy world? And he is an all-round awesome bloke. There you go.
Thank you.
I think that's probably echoed by a few people. To which Gary, in his kind of cleverly rather playing around with the word idle, says he's never idle. At least I wouldn't tell it to his face. So Gary's actually picking up Ryan on his spelling, which is a bit unnecessary. But yeah, that's true. Certainly not idle, that's for sure. Tom Colwell, who's Tom? You're putting out some great stuff as well lately, Tom. I really like the direction you're taking.
Yeah.
I think you might have been there the same year I was chatting to
Keith.
We
had a coffee.
Yeah, we had a coffee, didn't we?
Yeah.
Tom's doing some really good mentorship style stuff as well. So good work, Tom. Becky made it home safe and sound, which is fantastic. That's good to know. Thanks for calling, Becky. It's good to know. Louise Aker makes a comment. Sports therapists are far more known now than we were in the early 2000s. I think it's getting better.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit
to answer that question is literally it was the education and knowledge of the educators. So when I was at college and I did my BTEC, I ended up with a DDM. So I got most improved student, which was great. But I left Grimsby from where I'm from originally, and I've moved around a lot, so my accent's a bit weird. And when I get to Wolverhampton, it'll change again. But what it was the physiotherapy was more of your A-level background, and I couldn't do exams. I never did well at school, and I had to go back and do night college, English and maths and so forth before we had functional skills. But my tutor was a traditional PE background, so it was a case of you can become a PE teacher. So I did a sports science degree, and I was like, yeah, you'll be a PE teacher. I was like, I'm not going to be a PE teacher, and I ended up going down the route as a PE teacher. So I did a year of PE, and it's just like, well, that seems to be the process where sports science came from. Now, obviously, sports science has got massive in comparison with performance development and so forth, but so forth as injury rehabilitation, which is where the sports therapy is known more so now. So if you think early days, and a lot of people will be the same, is there wasn't the education there in the first place to say what direction of travel to go down, which nowadays we've got these fantastic groups where everybody can join in, and the open groups even fantastic because you can just pop in and pop out and see what's going on in the field. But I'm a member of quite a few organisations, either as an associate, because what I do is I sit on the fence and I like to see how the industry's going. So without mentioning every other professional organisations, I'm quite a few members of bits and bobs, because some people call me a troll, and you'll understand keyboard warriors and trolls. I'm not. I'm a person that'll say, okay, you're making a statement, can you back it up? And I want to make sure as an educator, so I fell into teaching accidentally, but I've had the passion to help people. So Ryan's a person that I know from the sports massage education aspect that I've taught on and so forth. I'm a quality assurer for numerous companies across the country, because I want to make sure, and I'll come back to this in a second with Despina's comment, is literally you're getting the best outcome. And the nice thing about the Wolverhampton degree that I've just started with is it is a brand new degree. So what it allows us to do, myself and my colleague Katie, is bring it into a scientific aspect, but bring it into a currency. And that's the biggest thing that got me into the industry, saying, well, I work in international sport, I've been a clinician, I know every single element of what you're going to go into and how to get into it. Now, I wouldn't say I'm the specialist in everything, but what I say is I'm teach from experience, and I've made the mistake, so I'll not let the next person make that mistake. And my father always said to me, your elders have made the mistake. They've put the pathway in for you to make that difference. Now, my mum and dad never went to university, so I was the black sheep of the family. So I made the mistakes, and I went down to different pathways and so forth. So yeah, it's really a case of getting on from there. And I say, picking up on the Spina's comment there, it says I completed a degree in sports therapy and rehab, and I feel disappointed. So in terms of that, it's about the education understanding. Gary picks this up a lot. We are in a highly self-employed industry, whereas it's saying we look at registration and we look at HCPC and so forth, and there's always sports. So I've contacted clubs where they go, we must have a physio, but it actually asks for a sports rehabilitator, or it asks for a sports therapist, and it says HCP. So the people in the industry that are asking for the jobs still don't know what they want. So when I say I'm a troll, I contact companies and say, I want your rationale, what you're looking for and why you're looking for it, because I try and get people into jobs. So say I did that. I used to be the East Midlands Sports Therapy Association rep for a number of years, but then I said, well, I'm moving areas, so I'm now in the West Midlands, but I'm still actively looking for opportunities for students. So you've got to say, well, actually, what are we trying to do? And the nice opportunity, say, working at a university now is making people's expectation of what a sports therapist is, working in the industry from day one, is knowing what you're going to actually come out with. Because I see a lot of students that go on to do physiotherapy master's degrees and go, well, what? Okay, other than job security, what you're going to go into, is your knowledge going to be better, or are you going to focus down neurological or cardiac or respiratory physiotherapy or so forth? But yeah, again, long-winded long-winded
I
answer.
saw that the other day. I'm not sure if it was Twitter or somewhere, but I think somebody reached out. I think it was a sports therapist saying, "Oh, I'm tempted now to do physiotherapy," and I think you just chimed in and said, "Don't."
Yeah.
Just said no.
Yeah, don't waste your money. You've got to know what you want to do. So I've wasted thousands upon thousands. So as I say, my doctorate's cost me £7,500, but it's got me in a specialist field that for the next 25 years I'm going to be enjoying doing, and I'm going to be specialising in doing. So it's a big investment. So you've got to. It's like when you do a CPD, you can go down any CPD and throw your money at things, but you've got to have a direction of travel.
Very good.
I saw a therapist a couple of weeks ago with one of these absolute fantastic roll of flyers they have, and they listed every single adjunct treatment they do. I'm like, that just confuses people.
Yeah.
Go in and be the specialist. So people come to me for being the next specialist because I educate people on what I do specifically. I also do all the adjuncts. I also do functional conditioning. I also do a little bit of psychology because my undergraduate focused in anxiety management and so forth. So one thing I say, going back to Nicola's last week, I use psychology a lot for adherence as well as for not to get people to go, I need to go see Keith, but I educate them to say, why do you need to do this yourself? Why do you need to look after yourself more? And that's really, really key. So I say the biopsychosocial thing that's come out into the industry recently is very, very key. Know your clients and know what they're after.
Very good. Yeah. I'm just checking now because, Despina has continued a little bit talking about what she was most disappointed about. I just have to scroll up a little bit. Does she come back? We're all working hard and we do need to get the recognition. I think it was the fact that even when you come out from that, a lot of finding work is not as easy as you would expect, despite the information they've got, because they're not.
What I would say in terms of that is, if you think about, let's say, with the knowledge of background of sport and exercise science, I see sport and exercise science as an umbrella. So what I did was I did my undergraduate and then went postgraduate. So I did a multidisciplinary degree and a multidisciplinary postgraduate. And again, that comes down to you haven't got a specialism. So you say, well, actually, where's the jobs? And generally, there isn't a lot of jobs in sport and exercise science. But what the graduate opportunity does do is say, well, actually, where's the focus you want to go down? Which is why I focused on the conditioning. And we never had the likes of the the strength and conditioning education. There wasn't pathways on that. It was you went down and did a master's degree in strength and conditioning and so forth. So I met Brendan many years ago on that pathway. So it's a case of, again, knowing what direction of travel you want to go down to and understanding that sort of focus. So as I say, generally I've specialized in rugby. My business logo was a rugby ball. It's a rugby player with someone being assessed and a mortarboard. And the reason why I did that is because I work in sport, I train with sports people or train sports people, I treat sports people, and I educate. So it's about understanding. A lot of Gary always picks up and says about knowing your unique selling point. So when lockdown came released and everyone started coming out, I was probably inundated with so many rugby players. And that's just it. For the first few weeks was rugby, because I got to be the person that is the rugby player. And it helps having, my thighs are probably the biggest than most people's chest circumferences. So obviously it has that sort of understanding. When you're working with a team, I empathise with the players. I've been a player of rugby league. And it's really basically a case of, well, what direction of travel do you want to go down to?
Excellent. Yeah. Chris Kidson mentions again. Yeah, sounds great, Keith. About Rosie, great work with combat athletes, as Matt just mentioned. Yeah, I shall put you in contact with Rosie. She's all political at the moment, but I think she'd like to have a little chat with you to share knowledge and stuff. I know she's felt like she was banging her head against the wall with a lot of combat. The same thing you're saying about athletes not understanding why they should be doing it. I want to ask you, because we're already 1:45 now, what are some of the things, and let's give some, you're going to drop some clinical pearls of wisdom now in terms of what you've discovered about, you've already mentioned a little bit about the conditioning, but what are some of the pitch side things which aren't being taught, which leave pitch side therapists a little bit exposed because they haven't learnt it with regards to neck injuries. And for example, the neck brace, you said some associations are saying you should, some say you shouldn't. What's the lowdown on that? Or is there not?
It comes down to competency. So if you think about there's so many different practitioners out there working in a sport that have come down from a different training provider. And if you think about the level that training providers pitch their courses at, their content may be completely different. So I've gone down the RFU, the RFL, and Lubus Medical and so forth, React First, all the different companies that have done these over the years, and I've done one from each of the companies over the years to try see what's different and so forth. One thing I'll find is, first and foremost, is it's about how you practice. So literally, when you do your 2-day, 3-day placement, your 3-day course, and you learn about how to do spinal management and so forth, you may never use it again for 6 months. Your course is 3 years long, or your accreditation is 3 years long. So you may never use it until 2.5 years' time. So one thing that I'm saying, what I was finding is confidence of what people are doing, or they've not even come across it and so forth. So I had a girl from a university that came and worked with me last season, and we had a guy that basically two of his players, or 2 players on the same team, went to tackle a guy, and they wrapped around him, and this guy's jaw went into the side of his head. So it dislocated the guy's jaw, smashed his teeth, and his jaw came out. The other guy hit the deck and he was convulsing. So when this student came on, this was a 3rd-year learner, had come on to the pitch with me. She just went to pot. So the first thing I did was, I've been doing this for many, many years. I practice it. I go with the players and the coaches. I practice all these things constantly through training and so forth. And I go into autopilot. So I'm going to become asymptomatic and I become a robot, because in the processes you're there. Emotions flood afterwards. I'm only human, but is literally as soon as you're there, and you can see so many therapists that just rabbit in headlights. What do I do? So I think why there's so many different aspects of that.
Whoa, hold on. What did you do? Don't leave me on the edge like that.
Okay,
I've got the guy with his jaw at the side here, long convulsing. What did you do?
Literally, the first thing I did, the guy that came to me with the jaw over there, I ignored him.
Right.
So I then went straight down. He was
screaming and obviously conscious and happy.
One thing that came about this was, because I'm a rugby or ex-rugby player, and I'm going back to play a little bit for vets in the olden days, I watch differently to what people do. So I've seen a lot of therapists where they're watching the game, and I watch the player. So I watch the player in impact. Contact, I give you 2 seconds to get up the next one. As soon as that guy come into contact, I see he went into a seizure in the air. So I was on the pitch as soon as that. So sports like football, obviously, you're not allowed on the pitch until the referee tells you. With rugby, you can see specifically what's that there. And I was straight on. Went down. First thing we did, basically head management, stabilization. As we're there checking his ABC and so forth, she came over and asking me what to do, bring the other therapist over. We got the air ambulance in, and another ambulance came. The game got cancelled and so forth. But what I then did to her says, do me a favour, go over to the gate. The ambulance is coming from there. You know the emergency evacuation plan. Go over to the gate, bring them over. Air ambulance came in and so forth. And she just said, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm not ready for this. So you'll see some people go into clinical practice because they can't compute with blood and guts and so forth. Whereas I went down the route of trauma management, where I sew people, staple people, put things back in and so forth. Not relocations things, but I love guts. So on a weekend, I annoy people because I will go to the butchers and I will get pig's trotters and I'll cut them open and sew them back up again, because I need to know my skill set is there. So what I say about the problem is people don't practice enough what they're learning. So if you go do a CPD workshop and you don't use that skill set for a year, don't ever utilize that skill set. Get rid of it. Go and do a refresher or constantly read up on it, because one day, this is why the RFL came away from that colours, is if you get the head in a wrong position or you move it when you've got a suspected spinal fracture, you could kill someone. And then that's your actions on from there. So without trying to be doom and gloom and scare people, what I'd say, to work in a contact sport, you've got to be very confident. And you can be emotional. I cry. When I finish, everything just flushes out in the colours and I'm back to normality and go, oh, What was that? But it's about the reflection. Did I do this right? Did I do that right? If I didn't do it right, how do I practice it and go about and do it again? And I say that's where my sort of education has gone on to further and further. And that my output is I want to be able to create a standardized thing that can be utilized across all contact sports and say, well, how do we do next screening? Do we screen before season? So all my players would come in on a pre-season and I'd do a complete neck screen and head repositioning. So I'll put a laser on the head. So it's only a little, a girl's hair clip, bobble, sorry if I get the name wrong, one of those things that go over, and I stuck a laser on, and all they do is go forward and look back. And I do it in all angles to make sure that they can refocus. If they've got any pain, I then constantly monitor. So if you've got a player that's hurt themselves on a Saturday, I'm on the phone to them on Monday, even though I don't see them till Tuesday. How are you feeling? Oh, it's still sore. Okay, get in and we'll do some soft tissue work. Here's some stretches. Because again, they could get an injury in training based on contact that they're doing. And it may not even be a heavy session. It's just because their head's sore and neck sore. So researching neck pain, have a look at these sort of processes. When you're in pain, your movement becomes dysfunctional. And when you're in a contact sport, that then can create higher risk. So it's literally understanding that. So I say within my experience, I'm not saying I'm the best practitioner, but what I do is annoy people because I always, when I did my work placement, my supervisor basically turned around to me and give me the answer of why. I was like, but why'd you do that? Because that's the way I was taught. No, that's not the answer. I need to know specifically. So then I went off and read a paper about it and questioned things, and that's why I question most things. And I say, go back to being a troll. People don't understand the difference between being trolling and actually questioning knowledge. And that's really what evidence-based practice should be.
Yeah, just critiquing. There's nothing wrong with criticizing, isn't there? As long as it's right. Well, you're definitely stirring up some people here. Becky is absolutely, this is making me want to get back into the rugby world, says Becky. So
please do come back, Becky. There's lots of opportunities.
Sue May Williams to say, Keith, lovely to see you on here.
Oh, great to see Sue. Not seen you for a while. How's Barnsley? Oh,
Barnsley. Your accent changed when you just said Barnsley.
This is the problem when I work at rugby league. It's up in Yorkshire. That's it, you change
and also, we got a specific question here from M. Turner, who says, can you point me in the direction of a good starting point for neck training exercises for rugby players? 7th tier, so no decent kit to use. Plus, what advice would you give to deal with stingers when pitch side? We have a new head coach, and I really want to make a point about levels of concussion and hoping to get this support in prevention and treatment. So there's a few things in there. I was going to ask you about, because you have to manage. I did football pitch side for about a year and a half, and half the time you're battling against the coach, aren't you, saying, look, this person can't go on next match. They've got to rehab properly. That's one thing which we could talk about maybe after. But so good starting point for neck training exercises. Is there a...
So generally what I always say is, if you think about, we'll talk about functional movement. Obviously, looking at the position of what necks do, you're going to work in all the planes. So there's no position-specific exercises. The olden days, it used to be you put a big head harness on and lift the neck so you get a big, thick neck. What you want to look at is dynamics. So by getting a TheraBand around and you're just working across, but it's not just flexion of lateral or flexion extension, it's rotation. So if you think about in a contact position, when you're tackling, because the research shows that tacklers are the one that's hardest, or the highest, should I say, that gets there, their heads wrap around. So as they're there, the heads go around. So you want to mimic by putting you could wrap TheraBand twice, nice and light, and it's just rotation work to work into there. Like I said, if you're introducing something new, don't go heavy. You've got to train the movement first before you train the load. So they get used to that, because if you think about it, when a rugby player goes into a game, probably Monday, they're getting DOMs in their neck. Very, very painful. So what you don't want to do is elicit DOMs with your training, because if you elicit DOMs with training, they don't want to do it. I remember a guy came back with a knee injury and he says, I did this knee session with a guy and my legs were killing. He said, I'm not going back. I was like, why did you do that? He said, because I just copied what he did. But he's been training for weeks. So it's literally bringing in small stimulus, rotational work in all planes. And then say there's a fantastic piece of kit out there called the Iron Neck, where you can do it in rotational stuff, but you don't need something that big for introduction aspects. So we can still do our isometric work as a sort of start principle, but we need to be more into our dynamic work specifically for the contact working into there. And that's a good starter point for training exercises. Because the thing is, what you can do is just give your players a piece to go away with them, and they don't have to do it with them, do it away. But what you do want to do, there's a lot of research that talks about supervised versus unsupervised training. We're all in a technological age. Get them to record, or get someone to record them doing it, because then they can send it over to you, and then you can tick it off. And then what I do is on a big whiteboard, they've ticked off, they've done their exercises for that week, and you've then said, okay, fantastic, I am watching you, because you communicate with them, and it shows that you care, and they will buy into what you're doing more.
I remember, I think this might be an example. I remember when I was watching Rosie's masterclass video, a lot of it, this is all exercises were created by somebody just thinking, I might try that. I wonder if that'll work. So this is probably an example where, as long as you start off easily and minimum load, you can actually invent exercises, can't you? As long as, like you say, you think of the function, you can adapt them, you can progress them, you can make them reactive with, like I say, a second person suddenly pushing on one side and having to react to it and make it more, Well,
the biggest thing what you look at is in lower level rugby is literally a case of cost. So I remember working grassroots rugby, we didn't even have tape. So let alone wanting some equipment, is literally a case of I just got the guys to say, okay, so what you'll do is you come and give me £5 deposit. Here's your TheraBand. Once you then give me that TheraBand back, I'll give you the next TheraBand after these amount of weeks training, and they see it as an investment, because you're going to throw that TheraBand away anyway because it's multiple use. But it just gets the players to then buy in and go, actually, it's simple. You don't need a big multi-purpose rack of weights to do everything, which is the old, if you look at the 90s with the French rugby, it used to be load the neck as heavy as possible and then just lift. And no wonder people I saw a player an ex-player who ex-amateur going into professional, where he's lost so much function in his neck is because he did not do any rehabilitation in his neck. He just did complete smash his neck to pieces and do a little bit of heavyweight. He can't move his neck now. So he can't drive because he's literally got no function. He turns and pivots at his waist. And that's the worst kind of neck I've ever seen. And if we can change that, then perfect.
What about the how to deal with, we're going to have to wrap it up soon, but how about the stingers on pitch side?
So pitch side stingers, going back to that, literally you need full function and power. Now, the problem is what you've got now is when you're looking at the pitch of what times you've got in order to be able to do things, you've got to make that sort of decision. If that person is holding their arm, transient stingers will last 30 seconds maximum. They'll shake their hands like this, move, and they're fully back again and off they go. But the problem is what you need to do is you need to monitor the people that have had stingers. There was a paper I put out a bit ago for the Therapy Live, and it was transient stingers, something more sinister. And it was a player that basically, after they got repeated stingers, they need full range of movement. They need full power into the bicep curl, lift up, extend, abduction, and they got full movement in the neck, no pain. That's the thing, because again, I've just said about if you've got pain in the neck, you're going to get your head in the wrong position. If you've got no power in your arm, you're not going to be able to play anyway. But what I'd say is you need full range of movement. You need full power and strength into the extremity of the neck and the arm. If they don't, you've got to make that decision to take them off, because if you think about it, a something that's simple and small becomes catastrophic. So this player actually had nerve damage long term from his tackling shoulder every time he goes in, and now he's got constant pins and needles in his hands. So he has to have some sort of nerve graft. And if you understand nerve rehabilitation and healing of nerves, it takes a long time for nerves to heal. Worst case scenario, there was a rugby player a couple of years ago who went in with a contact into there and it completely severed his brachial plexus, and he's now no longer got function in his arm. So it's about monitoring. And if that person has had more than 3 stingers in, I think it was a 6 to 8 week period, you've got to rest them. Now, if you're playing amateur rugby, that person's got to go to work on a Monday. They've got to be able to supply or support the family. If it's professional, that's different. They're getting paid for having that rest period. And that's what I mean is where you get your semi-professional is the hard bit, because if they're not playing, they're not getting paid. So they'll start trying. It's the same as concussion. They'll start trying to work the way around the pitch side assessment to actually lie to you to say, no, I can feel it. It's strong. It's fine. Be honest. It's about your education on your players. And that's the first thing I did when I went to a new club, is I sat them all down and I went with the worst case scenario. And I said, guys, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to hinder you playing. I want you to play because I love to see you playing. I'm not here to stop you. But then you've got to get the managers involved and the coaches involved, because they're the worst.
Very good. It feels like we're just warming up, and now we could really start talking about some examples.
There's just a quick one with Michael Jones has come up. He says, do you use eye movement with neck rehab? Yes, most definitely. Most definitely. When you're looking at vestibular and oculomotor, within neck rehab, there may be a neck issue towards the into the head. Can be linked into pain. It can be linked into a concussive mechanism. You'll find that symptoms may be actually worsened by a specific view. So if you're looking at vision and work from there is very, very key. And what I would say is, if you are interested in neck and concussion research, do have a look at vestibular and oculomotor rehab. That is one of the biggest key things that people are missing out on. And again, the people that are on tonight, or the people that read this later on, could comment whether they've done oculomotor and vestibular rehabilitation on their degree or their courses. If not, it is something to look at, because that is what makes... That's the difference between getting your rehabilitation and return to play wrong and prolonging the issue, or getting that person back healthier. And we know there is a specific concussion time frame where they're not allowed to go play, but we've seen times where people have taken years to recover, because if it's not right. So yeah, definitely eye movement and proprioception and key things.
As Gary says, because Paul Coker tickled us a little bit mentioning that earlier on a few episodes ago. So yeah, we're going to pick up on that and have another session with somebody concentrating on that. It's been one of the things which people have asked about. So
look forward to listening to that one.
Yeah, we will definitely do that. Well, look, Keith, it's 9:03, so the hour's up.
Wow,
sorry,
time
mate.
has flown.
I know, but
there's me thinking I had any content for about 15 minutes.
Not at all, no. And like I say, it was. It feels like it's just warming up. It's a shame. I think it's been one of those things where you're going to have to come back soon and continue. Maybe we could do, now people have heard you and can see how much experience you've got, we could have like a question thing and maybe get 10 questions from members and non-members, and then have you come back and go through them or something. That'd be great.
I was going to say, if you wanted to put my my email address on there as well, please do. I'm happy to answer questions and so forth. I say, this isn't a chore. This is a passion, and by talking, it stops me doing the washing up. It stops me cleaning the car.
What's your email address, Keith? Where's your email address, Keith? Is it Keith?
It's KJB.
KJB, of course it is.
Sports Therapy Services at gmail.com.
Services at gmail.com. I'll stick it in the comments now. KJB Sports Therapy Services at gmail.com. There we go. That should appear in the comments now. So,
if there is any specific research people want to get hold of or want some advice towards, I've got reference list upon reference list where you can get a lot of this, and I'm happy to send it over.
Fantastic. Thanks, Keith. That's amazing. Right. Okay, mate. What have you got planned for the rest of the year anyway, once you get out of the caravan?
Virtually teaching, and then teaching with lots of PPE.
Yeah, you're looking forward to that?
Lots of doctoral study, and exciting times ahead, really.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much for giving up your time. It's been a real eye-opener for a lot of people. People are still in the comments just chucking thank yous and fantastics, and so very well received. Thank you, as I knew you would be. Go away if you can hang around, then I'll come down and say thank you. But thank you very much, Keith Burnett. Thank you. You can say goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Otherwise, it looks like I'm just chucking you out. Right. Well, dude, fantastic. Dan, that was just warming up, wasn't it? I felt like half an hour in, 40 minutes in. Anyway, we will get him back, I promise you. We've done 15 episodes now, so there's nothing wrong with starting to get a few guests back. We won't have him back next week, but we'll definitely look to get him back in I think it would be, people are starting to ask specific questions now. If I was working pitch side and I had the opportunity to ask a question to Keith, then I would be, send something in. So maybe, we'll put something out there saying, imagine if we did have Keith back in a month or so, specifically about pitch side scenarios. It doesn't have to be neck and head injuries, could be anything. Then, we'll have a Q&A with Keith pitch side. That'd be really interesting, I think. Anyway, right. Thank you for joining us, people. Before I let you go, just to remind you, some of you have probably seen that Run Chat Live running conference 29th, 30th October is now officially 100% online. The demand for physical in Brighton, understandably, was not there, which is fair enough. I get it, traveling and all that and getting accommodation. So yeah, we've shifted it now to be 100% online. So there's still the STA discount, which, if I remember rightly, is as simple as STA20. There you go, to get your discount out. There's no time limit on that. So in your own time, have a read through the website, rcl20@invite.co.uk, and take your time. But hopefully you will make some plans to join us. We're going to try and make it as interactive and live as possible. Personally, I think there's so many courses out there which are just presentation after presentation after presentation. We're going to keep it interactive. We're going to have 15 minutes in between each presentation where I will still be on stage. Well, it is stage, on screen. And we'll have people popping in, guest speakers. We'll be talking about what coffee we're drinking, what's coming up next. We'll have a lunch break where I'm going to stay and eat my lunch on cam. So just keep it real and live. So if you can take 2 days off as if you were going to go to a conference, then do it. Don't try squeezing it into your clinic time. If you want to get the most out of this CPD, then try and book those 2 days off. And then lastly, those of you into running, Dr. Ben O'Nig, boom, smash. Thursday at 8 o'clock on Run Chat Live. Anyone who claims to look into the research behind running injuries, particularly foot ankle, effective footwear, orthoses, change of surfaces, will be aware of the name Ben O'Nig. 25,000 published papers since mid-80s. With a lot of people talk about overpronation. Don't be silly, that's a rubbish word now, as if we've just discovered it. He was talking about that and casting doubts on the use of the word overpronation back in 92, I believe, was when he first started questioning it. Carbon fiber plates, we're all talking about Kipchoge and all the other athletes who are playing around with them now and getting great records. He was working with Adidas back in the early 90s, playing around with carbon fiber plates. So fantastic opportunity. I still don't understand why he said yes to me when I approached him on Twitter, but he has said yes, and we'll be talking to him live from Calgary, from his faculty there. It's going to be amazing, just to tell people that you spent an hour with Ben O'Nig. But yeah, we'll be talking about footwear and running, and also the whys. Why is it now we're suddenly seeing that shoes can make a difference? Do we know how? He's released a paper called the teeter-totter effect, which is the seesaw effect, which talks about the physics of it. I'm going to try and keep it simple so runners can understand it. But if you really want to understand how shoes work and what's happened recently as to get these world records being set and all of these runners wearing the same shoes crossing the line, then tune in on Thursday at 8 o'clock UK time. And it'll be in English as well, which is nice after my last week's completely in Spanish episode. So there we go. Right. Thank you so much for joining us, people. We'll be back next week. Not sure who yet, but those of you who are trying to find a third, I don't mind doing it with 2 people. I just think it'll be more interactive if there's 2 or 3 people up there. So regional reps, if you want to get onto screen, have a chance to talk about yourself, what you do, return to work. It's all very COVID-19 related, as obviously we'll be chatting about that. Then feel free to email me and we'll see if we can actually get 3 people together to sort it out for next week. I think I saw talk from Gary talking about getting Brendan in maybe in a couple of weeks. I'm pretty sure I saw something from Gary up there. Hopefully Brendan will be joining us here in a couple of weeks, Keith Burnett. So yeah, that'd be cool. But I want to see some of you up here. I'm loving seeing these names here. So if you've got something to talk about, particularly if you're a regional rep, then send us an email or Gary an email and we'll get you up here to listen to what you've got to say. Right. Thanks, people. Take care. Look after each other. And we'll see you same time, same place, Tuesday, 8 o'clock on Let's Talk About. Take care. Bye-bye.